Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this important demonstration. I hope everybody can hear me because this microphone's a bit daunting. If you can't, stick your hand up. I've really been moved by seeing the handmade placards that everyone here has. I think it says such a lot when you've sat at home and made your own placards that you've really been thinking about this case and putting your heart into it. And I'd like to congratulate the organisers for organising this important demonstration, but particularly also I'd like to congratulate Asim and Mariam and cage prisoners and now the Justice for Aafia Siddiqui campaign for persevering in raising the issue and in really investigating this case. As you've heard, I'm a lawyer, and in the end actually lawyers are not much good. It takes people to draw attention to cases like this, and the people who've been got out of Guantanamo Bay in England were got out because people have stood on demonstrations like this and have held placards like this because cage prisoners set up their website and campaigned, and the lawyers can go to court and can do our best, but it's the people who achieve justice in the end. And you're all here because you want to achieve justice for Dr. Siddiqui, and I'm really just here to support that. I just wanted to make a few points which I hope haven't been made before in support of your cause. Firstly, about complicity. You've been reading about Binyam Mohammed, about his torture, and about what the British government has to say about complicity. I think that some of the same issues exist in relation to Dr. Siddiqui and what may be the complicity of the Pakistani government in what's happened to her. Because it's apparent from what the British government says that they treat the definition of complicity as being merely that you don't actually participate in the torture, providing you're not actively participating in the waterboarding or holding the thumbscrew or whatever it is. Then, says the British government, you're not complicit. Even if you knew or ought to have known about it, you have no duty to intervene. Indeed, they say, you can take advantage, effectively, of the torture by going in to question someone, even if you know or ought to know that they're being tortured. Similarly with extraordinary rendition, you have no duty to intervene, you have no duty to actively do something. Even if you know, and it's quite clear that of course Americans' intelligence services share information both with the Pakistani intelligence services and the British services, even if you know that somebody is going to be spirited off to Guantanamo Bay or to Bagram or somewhere else, then you have no duty as a government to intervene. You can simply sit on your hands. And that means you're not complicit. Well, that is not what international law says. International law says there is a duty to intervene when people are being kidnapped, when people are being tortured, when people are being placed in secret jails. And the British government, and I fear in Dr. Siddiqui's case, the Pakistani government, are not credible when they say that they are not complicit with these things. And that's what our legal action on behalf of Binyam Mohammed and other ex-Guantanamo detainees in this country is about. It's to get the British government to accept that it's been involved in wrongdoing, that it should have intervened, actively intervened, to stop these things happening. I know there is a lot of concern in Pakistan about what the Pakistani government is doing and whether it's doing enough. And I think, events like this will put the pressure on, because that's where you're going to get action. I know that everyone wants to see Dr. Siddiqui repatriated back to Pakistan, and only really when she's out of prison is there going to be any hope of really knowing what's happened. Where are her two children who disappeared? What happened 7 years ago when she suddenly disappeared? And the people who heard a woman screaming in Bagram in the airport facility there believe that that woman was Dr. Siddiqui. Are they right? Was she, as she and her lawyers say, sent to Bagram and detained there without charge? And these are questions that we really need to know the answers. And I think the thing about the war on terrorism now is that as more and more things emerge, as more and more facts emerge, as we find out more and more about the torture, about the extraordinary rendition, about what's happened, about the secret prisons, then it becomes more and more essential that the full facts come out, that we know everything. And it's you, the people, by demonstrations like this, by keeping up the campaigns, by putting the pressure on the governments, that are going to achieve that in the end we find out not just about Aafia's case, about all the other people in Guantanamo, Shakaram has been mentioned, but also the real purpose of this is to put an end to the torture, to put an end to the extraordinary rendition, to put an end to secret prisons, to put an end to people being held without trial, and to put an end to the complicity of governments in that happening. I just also want to mention, I think, that another aspect of this is the aspect whereby women and relatives of those who've been accused of crimes are themselves criminalised simply for being related to someone. And I think that's another big human rights abuse that's happened in the war on terrorism. I acted for a woman called Tahira Tabassum, whose husband was killed in Israel after, I think, he'd gone to Israel intending to blow himself up. His bomb didn't actually detonate, but he was later found dead. And she was put on trial at the Old Bailey. She had a young baby, 8 months old. She was put into high security prison. Her baby was taken away from her when she was breastfeeding. She was treated as a terrorist criminal, and she had to wait nearly a year for a trial at the Old Bailey, when much of the time she was in custody. And she was put on trial accused of knowing that her husband was going to go to Israel and blow himself up, when in fact there was compelling evidence that she didn't know. She was completely innocent. She was flabbergasted. She was bereaved. She was astonished that her husband was dead. She'd been left on her own with 3 children, the youngest only 8 months, etc. And there was effectively an attempt to criminalise her because she was related to her husband. And I think the same thing, from what I've read about Dr. Siddiqui's case, applies in her case, because she's related to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who, of course, famously has been waterboarded by the Americans and tortured, but also is alleged to be involved in criminal acts. Now, it isn't acceptable in a country that respects human rights and democracy for people to be made criminals just because a relative has done something wrong. And I think that's an important aspect of Dr. Siddiqui's case as well, whether she is in fact being victimised not because of things she's done, but because of things that members of her family have done. So I'd just like to say again, thank you very much for having me to speak to you. Do keep up this campaign, it's very important. And you, the people, each one of you, make a real difference. Thank you.